So let's dive into a question that kind of gets at a fundamental human need and also a really deep-seated fear. What happens when we are truly, completely alone?
I mean, we all know this feeling, right? That simple joy of just having some time to yourself. A quiet moment to unplug and recharge. That kind of peaceful, chosen solitude isn't just nice to have, it's actually good for us. It can be incredibly stress relieving.
But what happens when that solitude is no longer your choice? When it's forced on you and you have no idea when it's going to end? Well, that's when being alone turns into something else entirely, something much darker.
And this gets us to a really critical distinction we have to make: the difference between chosen solitude and forced isolation. They might sound similar, but believe me, their effects on us could not be more different. So on one hand, you've got chosen solitude. That's restorative. It builds you up. But on the other hand, you have forced isolation, which is not only incredibly stressful, but, as we'll see, actively damaging. It all comes down to one thing: control. When being alone is involuntary and when it's prolonged, our bodies and our minds start to react in some really severe ways.
So, what is actually going on inside our heads when we're forcibly cut off from everyone? Let's take a look at the science of your brain on isolation.
Okay, to really get this, we first need to understand a concept called social reality testing. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Think of it like a mental sounding board. We're constantly and often subconsciously checking our thoughts and perceptions against other people's, just to make sure we're seeing things clearly. When you're totally alone, that sounding board is gone, and your entire sense of reality starts to feel, well, threatened. Without that external check-in, the brain's internal balance goes completely haywire. The limbic system, that's our brain's hub for fear, stress, and raw emotion, it basically goes into overdrive. It becomes hyper-responsive, putting you in a constant state of fight or flight. And at the very same time, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles reasoning, focus, and memory, get this, it can begin to physically shrink. The very part of you that can think rationally and calm you down is being impaired. So, the result of this shift is pretty scary. Your rational thinking just fades into the background, while raw, unfiltered emotion completely takes over. Your thoughts can start to spiral, and your impulses, well, they can start calling the shots. You're not really in the driver's seat of your own mind anymore. And the consequences of this internal chaos, they're devastating. It leads to this whole cascade of horrible psychological and physical symptoms. We're talking depression, paranoia, even hallucinations. But it doesn't stop in the mind. The body suffers too. Everything from heart palpitations and headaches to severe digestive problems. It's a total system breakdown. Now, this isn't just some hypothetical thought experiment. This exact experience is the daily reality for thousands and thousands of people right now, in solitary confinement. Just let this number sink in for a second. In 2019, over 120,000 people in U.S. prisons were living under these conditions. This is not a rare or fringe practice. We're talking about a population larger than many American cities. And the level of isolation is just extreme. We're talking 22 to 24 hours a day alone. That leaves almost zero time for any meaningful human contact. And this can go on for days, weeks, or even years. Now, I want you to try and imagine spending nearly every single minute of your life inside a space that's about 6 feet by 9 feet. For perspective, that is smaller than the average parking spot. It's a box designed to break the human spirit. In fact, the United Nations, along with many human rights organizations, they don't mince words about this. They have a classification for this kind of forced, prolonged isolation. They call it torture. So how on earth did a practice that the UN literally calls torture become so common, especially in the United States? To figure that out, we have to take a quick look at its really controversial history. It's a pretty strange journey, actually. It started way back in the late 1700s with the Quakers, of all people. They saw it as a humane alternative to things like public whippings, a way for people to reflect and become penitent, which is where we get the word penitentiary. But criticism of its damaging psychological effects started almost immediately. Its use faded away for a while, but then it came roaring back in the 1980s, thanks to tough-on-crime laws and seriously overcrowded prisons. And that early criticism, it was powerful. Even Charles Dickens, after he visited an American prison, he was horrified. He called solitary confinement worse than any torture of the body. So for centuries, people have known just how profound the psychological damage is.
This brings us to the lasting impact of it all. What happens after someone is finally released from these conditions? And, maybe more importantly, is there a better way to do things?
The damage doesn't just stop when the cell door finally opens. People who have endured solitary confinement are 3 times more likely to show signs of PTSD. They report these fundamental shifts in their personality, crippling anxiety, and a real inability to connect with other people. I mean, the very skills you need to rejoin society are systematically destroyed.
And this really shows you the fork in the road. On one side, you have the US model, and on the other, you have a place like Norway, which focuses on rehabilitation instead of just punishment. And the results, well, they speak for themselves. Norway has one of the lowest rates in the entire world of people returning to prison after they get out. The Norwegian model just proves that a more humane approach, one that offers classes and job training and that treats people with some basic dignity, it isn't just a nicer option, it's a more effective one. It actually succeeds at what a prison system is supposed to do, which is reduce future crime. And that leaves us with one final, unavoidable question. We've seen the science of how isolation just devastates the human brain. We've seen that it has lasting traumatic effects. And we've seen that there are more effective, more humane alternatives out there. So if it damages people and actually fails to make prisons safer, why is it still being used?